It's very similar to what my parents saw, where, in my mind, I was like so good at everything. But, I think that I was probably the kid, twirling her hair and picking.
I know right now it's hard to see, but one day you gonna believe it. I was the first one counted out, now I'm the youngest one winning. My brothers tell me they see me, my sister saw me on TV. She said that you a superstar, but now I'm the underdog.
Stevi Carr, welcome to the podcast. And I was so excited, I forgot to hit record. So now we are officially recording. We're going to let it rip. And that's just, I think, your and I's relationship. So just a little bit about Stevi Carr, founder and CEO of Wise Wellness Guild, an insights-driven networking and e-commerce platform aimed to advance women through whole self wellness. And prior to that, she is an incredible leader in this community in Cincinnati. But really, I think anyone that follows her, she is something to look up to for sure. She's worked for P&G in different UC Health, all sorts of leadership positions, but extremely talented. One thing I saw, which I knew she was talented, but I loved this picture. One of the most influential I had here in preparation, named 2022 Influential Women nominated Greater Cincinnati. So you're just doing fantastic things. I really wanted to share your story, Stevi. And to be honest with you, I don't even know where to jump in on the Stevi Carr, journey. So I would love to ask you, hey,
Awesome.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. I think it's important to set kind of the foundation, because a lot of people probably don't know who Stevi Carr is. But if you want to let them know who you are, and then all the great things, we can get into what you're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for having me. I'm so excited. I was explaining to you earlier about how humbled I am to be on this podcast. You've had some incredible rock stars that I definitely admire. And I think that with this platform, what I love that you're doing is creating space to just allow for people to talk as humans and talk about the things that we're passionate about. And you being able to create change with a single person, I think is such an amazing objective. One person's listening. And so, for me, I'll start with just born and raised Cincinnatian, which is one of my favorite things about myself. But if you would have asked me that, 15 years ago, I probably wouldn't have said that. I, grew up on the west side of Cincinnati and had, what I would say is looking back, a very idyllic childhood. I, was really into sports, very athletic, was a dancer on my high school dance team, and, really just grew up being very competitive individual. And I absolutely love that. That's really important. I have a 6-year-old son, and, getting him into sports. I'm sure that if that journey probably for me, is very similar to what my parents saw, where in my mind, I was so good at everything, but, I think that I was probably the kid, twirling her hair and picking dandelions and things. I think for me, being athletic, I've never been the person that things have just come naturally and easy. I've had to work really, really hard at almost everything that I do. I'm not things do not come naturally and easy to me. I think I'm taller than your normal woman. I'm always what do I do with my hands, kind of a thing. And so, I think about that a lot when I think about, becoming this competitive individual that I naturally am. I think that truly a lot of that comes from, where I grew up is we all kind of grew up with a lot of this grit and resilience and determination and kind of feeling like we had to prove something, being from the West Side. And, as I've kind of grown up, I've really come to respect that sentiment that really, I don't have anything to prove to anybody, but I have this intrinsic self-drive and motivation that I think, gets me into trouble sometimes. My ego can be a little tricky sometimes, but I do think that a lot of it's just more about really wanting to be the best version of myself and really propel myself forward, because I really do think that this, world, anything is possible. And I really do believe that it's about hard work, but it really is about mindset. And it's about understanding your own your own dark, kind of the light and the dark side, and understanding, as I said, understanding your ego, understanding, that you need rest, understanding that it's not just about go, go, go. And that's really ultimately like the foundation of my company, Wise Wellness Guild, and how I kind of got into that. So
yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. And anyone that you can just sense, obviously hearing her through, if you're listening to this audio or if you're on YouTube watching her, but the energy Stevi has is the first time I know multiple people have told me, we worked on a fundraiser together, but you got to meet Stevi. And then I meet Stevi and I'm like, okay, you hear people like, hey, you got to go meet this person, meet that person. But when I stepped into the room with you, I was like, okay, you are different in a good way, like very, you have the self-awareness as you're talking about. You have ego to a certain degree, which is good. Confidence, I would call it. You might call it ego, but you have the confidence, but then you have the vulnerability and self-awareness, the empathy, and then the competitive juices. Like you said, when we work on the fundraiser, if we're going to do it, if you're going to be a bear, might as well be a grizzly bear. And
exactly.
And you were, very competitive in that. So it was a lot of fun. It was very refreshing for me to work with you in that endeavor. But going back to, Wise, and you started that in 2019 in November after leaving a great job with UC Health. And that's a tough time to start a business, right? In the midst of the pandemic and different things. So take us back to, I know you were planning to have a brick and mortar, and then you had to pivot to a virtual platform. And so you're in the midst of starting your own business throughout your career. And then all of a sudden this adversity hits. So walk through maybe someone that is going through that went through or is currently going through what Stevi did in 2019, starting a business and having to pivot.
Yeah, I think back a lot to that time. And I really do think that was one of those moments in your life that you have to just trust the process and trust what's meant for you. I left my job at UC Health thinking I am getting ready to sign on the dotted line for this physical space, right? We were, a month away. I'd picked out the doorknobs, the paint color, like we're ready to go. And this is in February of 2020. And then the pandemic hits and we're trying to make a decision on what's going to happen. And I realized that, we could not sign on the dotted line, that this wasn't going to work. There were a few other things with the negotiations with the space that it was going to be more rent than I wanted to pay. But I was like, this is the right place. And then all the things in my gut started adding up. And then the pandemic hit. And I have to go back to this moment of truly like being like on the bathroom floor crying. Like people always say that you have that moment, you have that visual. And I'm like, no. Like I'm looking in the mirror and then all of a sudden I'm sobbing and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I've left, not only did I leave UC Health, but I left P&G. I've left this like comfortable nest of like a sure 401k, like a for sure, like this. And I knew what the path was. And all of a sudden my plan just blew up into smithereens with COVID. And I sat there thinking, you've never not figured it out. Like you know yourself enough to know that you will always figure it out. Why is this any different? Right. I, have been in different moments in my career where, I knew that I wasn't in the right space. And how did I create something from nothing in order to find fulfillment? And, I did that at P&G. UC Health, we created that space to be able to bring like incredible connection between physicians and patients and the people working at UC Health, and to be able to create In Science Lives Hope. So like you can figure this out. And so we very quickly pivoted to create online programming. And we were one of the first ones to do this. to be able to provide a virtual platform on Zoom to be able to engage people in the same way that we were going to do in a physical space, being able to bring them together in a virtual space. And so that was kind of the first installation of things that we did to really kind of create a sense of community where everybody was feeling very isolated, very nervous, very lonely, and really garnering the attention of a lot of our corporate partners. So Paycor was the first one to kind of say, hey, we would love to do something on mental health with you. We would love to be able to, bring our resources together with you to really bring that to life. And that was just such a great vote of confidence because I've always looked to Paycor as being a best-in-class employer. We also, during that time, had been in negotiations with the brand Crunchmaster crackers, and we had signed on to do, a lot of events. And that obviously wasn't going to happen anymore. But I knew that there was an opportunity with them to be able to leverage their resources and providing access to resources for frontlines workers. So they had, so many samples going to Coachella and South by Southwest, and they have a product that will, what's the word? It has a shelf life.
Sure.
And so they couldn't keep it in storage, and we had no idea how long the pandemic was going to be. So we rerouted all of these samples that were going to these big music festivals to 12 hospitals across the country in order to fuel frontlines workers. And we were able to actually work with their distributor to get vitamins and water and like meals and different things like that. And that was kind of the second thing that kind of really put us on the national map to say, how do we leverage our resources to kind of really make sure that not only consumers are healthy, but also that like our healthcare workers and people who are caring for others are really cared for. And it was during that time that, I don't think I slept a lot. I don't know that my own wellness was in a great spot.
Sure.
But I do think that, that's where we really started to build an incredible team of people that came out of the woodwork and said, I want to be on your boat. I want to row with you. And that's where I would just say, in those times of struggle, like sitting in the silence and letting the grief fuel you in a way that like, if you just stick to your North Star, your grief will be able to be that fuel to get you going and get that motor humming. Like, let it be a part of there and sit with you, but also let your grit and determination, like, continue forward and allow for that to bring other people in. And the same people that joined me during that time are the same people that are on my team now. They've never left. They are my ride or die, my true north. And we were stronger than ever.
Yeah, I love talk about knowledge nuggets each episode. That is a huge knowledge nugget, is making sure to have great people on your boat. Like you said, it's a village, and then fueling the fire, as you said, let some of that grief sit, understand it, own it, and then, use that to drive forward. That's fantastic. And just a little bit about the true north. And, I know you're working a little bit about WISE, right? And I'll let you touch upon this, but advance women through whole self wellness, creating better peak performance, avoiding burnout, lots of different things you're doing. But can you kind of touch upon maybe that true north, right? You just mentioned it, the true north of helping others that helped you through yourself, through that adversity, going from that moment where you're devastated on the bathroom floor, emotional, crying, to then, hey, this is my true north to help others, in particular, also women, to advance themselves. So I don't maybe get through, you can help people get through moments you were just experiencing. Can you talk a little bit more so people can maybe understand like what WISE is and WISE Wellness Guild is, and then what you've done? Yeah,
absolutely. I really, talking about the purpose and why we exist, burnout is one of those $100 words that like it's everywhere, right? Everybody's talking about burnout, quiet quitting, all of those things. And what we recognize though, when we were launching WISE, is that burnout truly is it's multifaceted, and it's really something that is very personal. It can sometimes be manifest itself in a lot of different ways, but the why, is very personal. What we characterize burnout is a lack of sense of purpose and a lack of sense of like the ability to deliver against that purpose. And there are a lot of people in the workforce, in particular women, that, obviously with, when you start to look at the progression of career and why women aren't achieving these higher levels of success, and from an equitable standpoint as our male counterparts, we know that there's a lot that institutions are doing to create equitable spaces, right? And we know that there are men like yourself that show up as allies and want to be great and do better. It's also a challenge, though, of being able to exist as a human in all of these other areas that are who you are outside of work. So if you have a family, if you are caring for aging parents, if you are an aunt, if you are just a friend, existing, and this is even prior to the pandemic, that we knew that from the number of men and women entering the workforce is 50-50. But by the time that they get to that managerial role, it plummets, because that usually coordinates directly when people are intersecting with a lot of these big, like, first life moments, like death of a parent, new baby, like a lot of those types of things. And so when you take on more of that responsibility, a lot of times we aren't acknowledging the role that career and financial wellness has with all of these other things. We've talked about work-life balance, but we've not acknowledged the fact that career and financial implications very much have a strong output and outcome to your mental health, and the vice versa, right? Of your, how the things you're fueling your body with, if you're eating right, if you're sleeping well at night, if you're working out in the morning or, after work, all of those have to do with the fact of your ability to maintain resilience and being able to withstand some of those pieces. So we, before I even started Wise officially, I'm a big cognitive and behavioral sciences nerd by background. It's a lot of what I did at P&G. But what we know is that, it's this, social determinants of health, and, really understanding like where you live and the nutrition of be living in a city, and the grit required for you to withstand waking up in the middle of the night to ambulance alarms and lights. And, a lot of those things very much has an impact on your ability to show up to work and the way that you approach your work. And we don't really think about that a lot of times. We expect everybody to show up and be the same and be willing to do that. We don't take that in consideration. So, Wise, I did about 500 qualitative interviews over the course of 4 years leading up to building Wise. And Wise is very much a demographic, psychographic, behavioral, and social determinants of health algorithm at its foundation, to be able to really look at how healthy are you across those 8 pillars of wellness. Yep. And, I would ask you, Kyle, for example, I know you've gone out through a huge health along your health journey, but the more that you've really invested in your physical wellness, have you seen an impact on your ability to be a better leader and perform better? And have you seen that correlation?
Yeah, I think 100%. I would say I'm to the point where if I don't create a balance, or if I don't work out, I'm better off doing less work and going, it's crazy as it sounds, to work out, or make sure I'm eating right or sleeping right, or else I'm I just have lack of mental clarity and my decision making, my moods, and how I interact. It really does impact what I do at work and my career. So yeah, I would say 100%. I've realized that probably in the last couple years. I think since 2019, when you started your business, kind of the COVID made me kind of press pause and evaluate how I was probably not living. I was traveling a ton. I was not living a balanced life. at all. And I think that actually kind of made me understand what a balance is, or, and I think that's always an ever evolving question, is like, what is work-life balance? But I would say for me, I started, I'd been the heaviest of my life. I knew I needed to lose weight. I knew I needed to get my cholesterol down. I knew I needed to work out more because I felt better. And I would say I'm so much in a better, just my whole life is better. My career is better. So yes, I know that was a long-winded question or answer, but it is 100% true for me. I know that.
And it illuminates, though, the way that I think about balance. I actually think about it less as a seesaw and more as like a top. So if you think about spinning a top and you think about the 8 pillars almost as like a spider web, right? If it's a circle, I think about it as like, you're always going to be searching for like, how do you keep the top spinning? Because that's really what we are, right? We're constantly in motion of like, how are we going to continue to keep doing this? And sometimes it's going to go slower and sometimes it's going to go faster. And honoring the fact that, like, if we can find a way to keep all of them in a healthy space, that let's build on our strengths. So for you, you're a high achiever, like you've clearly, recognized that your physical health, your nutritional health, the more that you impact that and the more that you invest in that, you're going to start to see that it's going to impact positively or negatively other areas of your life. What I would say, though, is what we've been able to see statistically speaking, is if people can get to, above a B average on, at least 5 of their 8 pillars, that generally, like, it tends, just like it does everything else, like there's a lot of other things that start to like kind of rise the tide. So you might say, some people might look at your career trajectory and say, oh, like, he's investing so much in himself here, but like it's positively impacted your career. You also personally have started this podcast, right? And you've now been able to go and like find other areas. So you've maybe taken the pressure off of like how much fulfillment you're expecting. You're putting less pressure on your like day job. So that way you can do you're like a ninja. You can go in and do exactly what you're supposed to do and not put so much pressure on you to get that fulfillment. So you have energy to go do things outside of this, like this podcast, that like can really fuel you. And that's where we've really seen the benefits of being able to do the self-awareness, understanding where you're lacking and saying, okay, how can we go and maybe put less pressure on all of the areas to be able to live a more whole, full life. And that way we can stay in the workforce so we don't overlove it. And that's just really going back to like women. We see so many women put so much pressure on themselves and their career to fulfill them. And it's a mask for them feeling like they have insecurities on all of these other areas. They've been sold a fake narrative that like they have to do things like twice as much, or they have to show up twice as much to like produce the same results as a white man. And we've not only created that narrative for ourselves, but like we've also put pressure on other women to be able to do that and judged other women. And I think that if you talk to men, like there's maybe some unconscious bias. I would say, especially for Black women, there probably is bias there. But I do think that ultimately it's about owning what's right for you. And, you'll start to recognize that if you start to like just put less pressure on your career and invest more in other areas of your life, that your career trajectory will soar. Like it absolutely it doesn't make a lot of logical sense, but I've seen it time and time again that like it's been magnificent to see the more that you rest, the more effective you are.
Yeah, no, I think quality over quantity for sure. I kind of grew up a work traditionalist, and I'd say it was quantity, but I do think there's obviously you have to put in the work. There's a line between the two, but I think you're right. Like sometimes the more I read, the more I exercise, the more I do these, I just get rejuvenated, different ideas, yes, different engagement, different lenses. And I'm super proud as an employer to have more females, and we've promoted some into leadership, and I meet with them, and I was curious. I want to ask you this question. I asked them, I said, what's your biggest, because I am pretty conscious through our industry. I try to sit in a lot of the female sessions and say, okay, hey, how can I be, as a white male, show more empathy to not just to females, but to different ethnicities, races, genders, so on and so forth, have more understanding and learning. And I do talk to some of the folks in our group, and they actually say sometimes like you said, the females are sometimes the most judgmental, not all the time, but there is so if there is I guess from an educational perspective, whether it's they're going up against maybe a unconscious bias against a male, or there is a female kind of vying for another one, competing or trying to put them down, or it's another male, either or. But I've heard that as well. And I don't know if you see that through coaching, where sometimes they had told me, say, Kyle, sometimes it's not, always the males. Cause I said, hey, is it always the males that are within our organization, or others that are trying to put you down or trying to maybe have a bias? And they're like, sometimes it is the females too. So
yeah,
I don't know if you see that.
It spawns from a lack mindset, which a lot of times comes from this very, and I'm not going to put a generation on it, because I've seen it across all generations. But it comes from that traditional, when women started to rise in the 80s and 90s into that role, it's that only one of us can succeed at the top. And so they're kind of that, like, there's not going to be many of us. And if it's going to be somebody, it's going to be me. And I think that where that shift in mindset has kind of come from is that, a lot of that lack mindset comes from insecurities of what true personal leadership looks like. And when I say personal leadership, it means like alignment of values. Sometimes it's a misalignment of like one leader to another, of if one leader values health and family security and relationships, and another person values financial security, achievement, and I don't know, creativity,
Sure.
Then those misalignment can really be a challenge. What I would encourage the organization to do is say, let's all understand and be open about what we value, and really understanding intrinsically like who we are as individuals. But let's make sure that those values, that there's at least a couple of values that align with your company core values. Yep. And let's gather around those to say, as a company, you work here because, you really value relationships, or you really value, personal growth and development. And that's why you've decided, you really love being able to be somebody who can really help to create a win-win-win situation. And I think that that's where I've seen the most success of a lot of that subsides, is when you can help people to realize what that common goal is, and understanding that that's also a part of the reward system, that some of those women in particular, speaking on, really try to bring other women down. If they recognize that they're going to be rewarded by finding that common ground, a lot of them can really start to back off a little bit and say, oh, sure. And I won't say that it's always successful, because again, people who are in a lack mindset are in a lot of times in a survival mindset, and they're in, fight, flight, freeze. So they're probably, somebody who's not really healthy themselves. But I do think that self-awareness can be really helpful. No,
that's great insight. And I think that's, once again, passion. I think we all, whether you're male, female, can all be understanding, because I don't know what it's like to be female. I don't know what it's like to have a different color of skin. Like, I am who I am. But one thing I did, which created, I think, some empathy on I remember I was 23, 24, and I was then an early CEO with a title, even though we were only maybe 5 employees or whatever it was. I remember walking into rooms and oftentimes saying, there's no way this guy, he looks like a 16-year-old, right? Mm-hmm. This guy, he looks like a kid. How is he running this company, right? And so I had a little bit of understanding what it's like to be put down, I guess, mm-hmm. And saying why. And I just was madder than hell. Like you talk about using that that pain for gain. And so I try sometimes, and I don't know if that's I say, hey, if you do feel that from a male or a female counterpart that, hey, you got promoted and you're not getting the support, or you hear they make a comment or whatever it is, I said, use that. I said, I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes, but I did experience this. Is that a good way to resonate, or is it better just to focus on, is it good to use my personal experiences in a certain format? Because I'm always conscious, like, well, I don't want to be the white male that's, playing not the victim, but a challenging situation. So it's like, sometimes I don't know how to navigate those waters as a leader. Is like, do I share an experience like that? Do I not? I don't know what you think about that.
The fact that you're even thinking about this, like, Kyle, like, I know you're an incredible leader, right? Because there's a lot of leaders that aren't even asking themselves this question. And I do think that, leveraging personal experiences in that way, that being able to say that's a different type of bias, right? The fact
Sure.
that, like, somebody that maybe has been, 20 years experience in the workforce,
Yep.
looking to you coming in, being like, what do they know? What they don't even recognize is that, like, you have this power of servant leadership that, like, nobody's maybe ever afforded them, that they didn't even know existed, that you're
Right.
going to listen to them, that you're going to leverage their experience because they are the expert. And, like, you acknowledge that, like, your superpower is totally different than theirs. And that it's not, again, I think that utilizing your experience in that of a way of, you can never fully understand what somebody's gone through and bias and experiencing that, and that you would never dream to say that, like, that they compare, because they're just it's apples and oranges.
Yep.
I do think that, the more that we can really understand each other's like background and experiences, and recognizing that, we've all gone through stuff, whether they're like big traumas, little traumas, we've all gone through our sense of, like, experiences, that the more that we can just acknowledge that they exist and compare them less, I think that just is going to be better in creating, like, a level of human decency that I think we've really lacked for a while.
Sure. Wow.
Yeah.
Powerful to say the least.
Yeah.
Man,
I think
that's powerful. That's really,
what I one thing that you just said that I wanted to, it just kind of allowed for me to, I just think about a lot of times with, when we think about wellness and we think about resilience, and we think about there's a thing that we talk about, like, allowing for people to withstand that pressure. So in that dynamic you said about, like, the two women, right?
Yep.
Is that we also have a choice of whether, like, not only what somebody's saying, but also how we react to it. And a lot of what we talk about within WISE is a lot about, there's resilience, and then there's rest and recovery. And we don't talk a lot about the rest and recovery in order to continue to be resilient. And as we talk about this resilience, like, in cultivating it, a lot of it is about strength, but it's also about maintaining our personal boundaries, right? It's about, like, if you think about that armor and being able to, like, if you're strong enough, sometimes it's a boulder and sometimes it's a pebble that feels like a boulder that will just take us down, right? So It can be that, like, sometimes it's just something that somebody said that you just snap and you're like, where did that come from? Like, it wasn't even that big of a deal, but I made it a huge deal. I think that I would talk to your team a lot about that, because a lot of times the personal boundaries that we set for ourselves, we allow for others to impede on those a lot more, because we don't even really know what they are. Like, we haven't set them for ourselves, and we haven't established them to understand that if a woman is coming and, talking smack, or, like, kind of like saying, oh, this person isn't doing their job, or, like, coming for them, like, you don't have to actually accept that as truth. Yep. Like, you don't have to even hear it. You can pretend like it doesn't even exist because it's none of your business. But if you don't have resilience, like, that could really impact you and your psyche, and get into, like, the mental gymnastics that that really can, like, impact your ability to perform, because you're so worried about external validation and being liked, that I think a lot of women, like, we never consider our own personal boundaries, and we never consider that, like, we really are relationships people. It's how we've survived, like, for centuries, right? Is that right. And so that was just one thing that we've really been having a lot of really important discussions on within our community, is about like setting better boundaries is better for everyone. And that what people say about you is none of your business. Like, but you have to be strong enough to be able to actually believe that. And like, it requires rest and recovery.
I used to take things so personal. And as we've grown, we have close to 200 employees, and you can't make everyone happy. And someone might make a comment on Facebook or LinkedIn, and you read it and it just affects you. It's hard not to, right? When you see it, when it's in front of your face, it's hard not to take it personal. Like you said, your mental health is like, you feel like, man, am I ever going to do anything right? But then you're looking at that pebble, probably someone thinks a pebble, but for me, it felt, or for someone else, it could feel like a boulder. So I really resonate with, resiliency, because it's hard. It's a lot easier said than done. Or a pillar, like you said, one of my pillars, which was health and wellness, went way down. Some of the other pillars were going up, and then trying to balance to get those 5 of 8 pillars that are, doing well. And it's hard to find that, being, but I think that's about life, right? It's like sports or in business. It's like, what is easy? Like living the life you want isn't easy, in my opinion. And so what would you recommend? I know that's kind of a macro statement, but from your standpoint, as we kind of come towards an end here, like what are something that you would recommend on how to live that overall wellness that you coach, of like, how do you get to those 5 pillars at least, or how do you live that? I know that's a broad base. Is it really being focused on planning? Is it really having, a definitive daily plan, weekly plan? How do you find that, okay, hey, I can put time here because I need to do this, I need to do that? Because to me, sometimes it feels overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, I got all these things I got to do at work. I got 3 kids. I got 3 kids now. I got, a great wife that I'm trying to, maintain that relationship, but then I'm trying to grow the business here. And it's like, oh my goodness, anxiety off the roof, right? Like I feel the pressure of the world. But then sometimes I've related back to folks like yourself in conversations, like press pause, take a deep breath, write some things down, you can do this, right? So what would be maybe an overall viewpoint on living your best life, I guess?
Yeah, for me, it comes down to honestly, a very, very simple concepts that has a lot of different ways to execute. And it really is around intentionality. We are so good at being achievers in our careers, and we project manage the hell out of things, right? We are so good at sitting down and crafting the annual plan and like putting the metrics associated and how many things need to go into this. But when it comes to our own lives, like we just roll up, get out of the car, and we're like, all right, here I am. Like, what are we doing today? And I just think that that's like so crazy to me that is honestly 99 of 100 conversations that I have with people. Like that is how we exist.
Yep.
And what I found is the secret is like truly like you would project manage, anything in your career. It's about being intentional about really, again, that self-reflection. I really do feel like, the name wise actually comes from the term wisdom, and wisdom is knowledge applied. So we are not lacking the knowledge. We have everything at our fingertips. We know what to do. We just lack the ability to execute against it and apply it because we get very distracted by things that actually don't matter, that are obligations of things that we don't want to do, or they're out of guilt because we don't have good boundaries. And so I just would encourage people to really give yourself the gift of time to say, and it doesn't have to be like a whole 2-day offsite work session, like whatever. It can be over time to say, intrinsically, what do I value and how, like currency, how am I putting my time against those things that I value? And being really intentional. There's a gentleman, Richard Boyatzis. He's a professor at Harvard, but he created this concept called intentional change theory. It's out of Case Western Reserve. And they have an incredible program up there that I'm going through currently to better understand the concepts of this. But intentional change theory is truly just about being really intentional about how you want to live your life. And it's about understanding that glide path of where you are and what's your real self and what's your ideal self. And it's about being ruthless, about failing time over time over time and trying out new ways to get to that ideal self until you achieve it. And I think that it's that intentionality doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect. And so if you say, I want to, I've got 3 kids and my wife is just, doing incredible with like really taking the load off of this. I really want to find ways to connect with her. Okay. Intentionality would maybe look like, being intentional about taking her, on a surprise date that you plan once a month. I'm making that up. I'm not signing you up for that, but like, just as an example of like,
it's a good idea.
But if she also has to value being surprised and not like, and like knowing that like she also like giving up control of that. Right. And so, it's about intentionally planning those things that like would make you feel good and would make you feel like you got that opportunity to connect with her. And then also being able to say, okay, intentionally, I'm also going to, with my kids, like, I'm going to be there for them at their sports and I'm going to be there for them at Halloween and I'm going to show up for these things. Like that means that you're saying no more often than you're saying yes to things. And like, I really think that that's just intentionality. It's about like truly respecting and honoring, like, and being selfish about the things that matter to you. And that's how we get to like be proportional in how we spend our time and energy on things.
That's amazing. Cause I feel like I'm right in that right now where I'm trying to be more intentional. The time currency, as you mentioned, so many great words of advice and things that I want to get better at. So I think there is, and I love what a great takeaway potentially personally is a surprise date for Kristen. So she doesn't, I don't know if she'll listen to this podcast, but hopefully she doesn't. So then I won't tell her that Stevie gave me that idea.
There we go. There we go.
But man, I could talk to you for hours and you're obviously as special as I know, and hopefully I'm sure the listeners feel the same way after listening to this episode. So what is a way I always love to make sure that people can follow you. So obviously, hopefully they enjoyed the podcast, which I said, I think they will. And how can they follow, Stevi Carr? I know any websites, handles.
Yeah, absolutely. So Wise Wellness Guild, we are on Instagram, all your major platforms. Wise_wellness_guild on Instagram is probably where we're most active. And then you can actually go to wisewellnessguild.com to learn more about, you can take our 100-point wellness assessment if you're interested in kind of doing that self-awareness exercise for the 8 pillars of wellness. We also represent over 400 small women and minority-owned wellness businesses across 33 states and 6 countries. We really believe that, when you're looking to invest in yourself, yes, it's going to take large companies, producing the right wellness goods and services. But truly, when you think about, where you're going to get your massage or what mental health provider you want to see, a lot of times that's very much a local endeavor. And so we are really committed to providing those vetted resources for you. So we've got a wealth of content and resources on our site that if you are interested in taking the next step on your wellness journey, we just highly encourage that you kind of look in to invest. While we are designed for women, we are very much committed to serving men and women. We believe that we need healthy men and allies to be able to create healthy communities. So that would probably be the 2 ways. And then the very last way is sign up for our newsletter. We have an incredible newsletter that goes out once a week. We won't overburden your inbox, but a lot of really great wellness tools and reminders on boundaries and on, where to get, your best, yoga provider in your city, and a lot of really great reminders there.
Yeah, no, I follow. I think I need to get in your newsletter. I don't think I am, but I follow all your stuff online. I've for quite a while since we met, and It really is, not just because you're on the podcast. It's really, as they can hear you verbally, there's a lot of written content that's really fantastic and very useful, very mindful, very practical to put into the daily lives. Like I said, there's a lot of things I would like to do. Like you said, it's about execution. So if I learned anything, it's taking it. We all have the knowledge, but it's to execute with intentional purpose. And
Just
I think that's super
Start with
important.
one. Yeah, absolutely.
Starts with one step, right?
Yeah.
I remember I was on my fitness, try to drop those 40 pounds. It's just take that step, go for that walk, just start that journey. And next thing you know, you're 5 miles in and you feel great. And you're like, I got my 10,000 steps a day and we're moving. Right. And feeling the energy and then the mental clarity. It's like you said, it just starts with one. And man, really, really appreciate it, Stevie. Best is ahead for you. And can't wait to follow your journey as you continue to change this world in a positive way, and wish you nothing but the best.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, huge fan. I'm so excited to see what's ahead for you here too, and looking forward to hearing who your next guest is going to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
I know right now it's hard to see, but one day you gonna believe it. I was the first one counted out, now I'm the youngest one winning. My brothers tell me they see me, my sister saw me on TV. She said that you a superstar, but now I'm the underdog.